for coming. Sorry, I feel like a school teacher.
This is good. This is really good. I'm glad you're here.
Love it. Nice to meet you all. My name's Izzy. I work as a community lead at Wiser Elite. For those of you that I haven't met, welcome to Wiser HQ. You've probably seen some of our team around this evening, but this is a Trumpet sponsored event tonight. So Rory Sadler, the CEO and co-founder of Trumpet. Who Trumpet are, they're a buyer enablement platform. I will not go into the pitch because that is your pitch. But if you would like to learn more about them, we've got our little cards on the seats. You can scan that QR code or take you to the website. So snazzy. And you can learn a little bit more about Trumpet and what they do. But obviously, because they're a buyer enablement platform, we were so excited that Rory wanted to partner with Wiser Elite. They're also the headline sponsor for The Elites, which is our new awards. If you haven't seen all of their little stickers around the place, they're in the bathrooms. When you go for a wee, you can see them there. But that's our new awards for the tech sales industry, so please do get involved. Nominations close on Sunday the 12th. So love to see you guys, top performers, leaders, women in tech sales. Love to see you guys represented there, and thank you to Trumpet for sponsoring. But firstly, before we get started, we've heard from a little dicky bird that it's Alex Harris's birthday, and he's come to this event on his birthday.
That's dedication.
So Rory's request, don't kill me, Alex. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Love you. Cool. So tonight we're here to talk around buyer enablement, the shift to buyer enablement, obviously what's going on in the current climate. It's very different to what used to be sales enablement was the buzzword. Now we're speaking about the buyers and buyer-centric journey, and I couldn't be more honoured to be up here with a bunch of 4 powerhouses to speak about buyer enablement than the 4 guests that we have tonight. So we're going to go around, give a quick introduction, and then we'll get going with the conversation. Just so you all know, tonight will be split into 2 sections. We're going to start with setting the scene, what's going on, why there's been a shift, what that means for you guys. Let's get a bit of an understanding, then we'll have like 2 or 3 questions at the end. Take a 10-minute break to go to the toilet, grab some more drinks, pizzas, and then we'll come back and give you some actionables and tangibles that you can take away tonight on how you actually implement that and what we can do within our sales process to be better focused towards the buyer. So Rory, quick intro from you.
I've already done my intro. But yeah, Rory, co-founder, CEO, delighted to be here. Thank you very much everyone for giving up your evening to learn about buyer enablement.
Hi everyone, I'm looking at some people finishing their pizza and I really wish I had a slice. But my name is Malvina and I'm the Director of Sales Enablement at Reachdesk.
Hey guys, my name's Aaron Evans. I work for an organisation called Flow State with my co-founder Raphael. We sit in the second row there. And we are a sales enablement consultancy helping organisations to either get better at sales enablement through skill, through best practice, and obviously add extra capacity as well.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Alice, CMO at Cognism, so I'm here just to give the marketing perspective to the conversation.
Amazing. So before we get started with this conversation, I'd love to gauge from you guys, our audience, what marketing you're selling into. So if you're selling into SMB, put your hand up. Is everybody else selling into enterprise?
Yeah.
Yes. Great.
No big market? Oh, yeah, don't forget about you guys.
I'm sorry. Cool. And we'd love to start tonight with just, I guess, a statistic. Actually, no, before we get to the statistic, we just want to throw to you all, obviously this is all around buyer enablement, that's the topic. So just a couple of show of hands, a couple of people giving us an answer of what is buyer enablement.
I guess that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Does anyone have a say?
Yeah, go for it.
Using Trumpet.
Oh.
Is that right?
Yeah, go for it.
Is it like making life easier for your clients?
God forbid, eh?
Well, I guess the king of buyer enablement, do you want to give the proper definition?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's making it easier for your buyers to buy. So thinking about their journey, removing friction, and just making it seamless. And to sum it up. It's quite difficult to sum it up.
Yeah, in one way of summing it up, that was perfect. So we've seen a recent study report, which I guess when we were having this conversation before we were planning this event, something that we're all really excited to speak about, and I guess where this whole conversation started from is there was a study from Gartner that said 72% of buyers would like a rep-free experience. So, Erin,
Savage.
give us your reasoning. And also, I've completely messed up because that was meant to be a guest from the audience.
I know, you're on fire tonight.
Glide over that.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's kind of an apocalyptic event going on in sales at the moment, and hopefully that should draw a large intake of breath of you at the moment. Buyers don't like us. They hate us, in fact. They don't want us involved in the journey. And here's what's interesting about that statistic. 43% of the buyers that did have a rep experience had buyer's remorse. So there's a massive disconnect at the moment between what buyers want and what sellers and organisations are giving them. There's lots of reasons behind this, and I'm happy to give my 10 cents worth if you want.
Yeah.
But look, we've commoditised selling to the point now where it's basically a terrible experience for the buyer. Put your hand up if you've got SDRs in your organisation. Put your hand up if you've got AEs in your organisation. Put your hand up if you've got CS in your organisation, AMs in your organisation. This is the horrible experience that we're giving buyers. I know one thing. I'm going to be reached out by an SDR. SDR is going to say to me, hey, you've got 27 seconds to talk to me, bro. Then I'm going to talk to them and they go, do you know who you need to speak to? You need to speak to my AE. And the AE is going to get on the phone with me and he's going to ask me the same 6 questions I always get asked. What's keeping you up at night? So tell me a little bit about how you're solving this problem at the moment. What are the implications if you don't solve this problem at the moment? And the buyer goes, I don't fucking want to know. Just show me your product really quickly so I can extract some value. I then decide to buy your product and then I get introduced to onboarding, who I meet very, very briefly for 10 seconds. And then I get introduced to CS. I'm the person that you're going to speak to regularly, but don't worry, I'm going to hand you on to AM at the moment. AM turns around and goes, I'm never going to really deal with you. I'm just here for the commercial conversation. So do you want to renew? And I go, I don't know what the product is at the moment that I've bought. And then I get handed over to CS and they go, I'm too fucking busy. I've got 300,000 other accounts. And guess what? You're the last thing on my mind at the moment. And the buyers turn around and go, I'm voting with my feet. I don't want a fucking rep involved in this experience. They don't like you. And I mean that in a nice possible way. Outbound is dead. It's completely and utterly dead. Now, put your hand up if you've responded to an email over the last 12 months, someone's telling you something and you don't know who they are.
I regretted it.
Says it all, right? Over the last 3 years, email has gone up 70%. Response rates have dipped 30%. The buyers don't like what we're doing to them. So there's an apocalyptic event going on in sales at the moment. But there is a way around it.
Am I going to get into that?
Oh, we will, yeah. Part two.
Yeah. There is hope, so don't worry. So we'll get into that in the next section. But I guess speaking about when you're talking to those buyers that you mentioned, Erin, and people are getting a little bit fatigued with discovery, and that's something, Malvina, that you're quite passionate about. Like, where is this fatigue come from? Do you think it's something that's happened quite recently? And how would you, I guess, suggest that we kind of tackle that?
So it's an interesting one. I'm passionate about sales enablement. I love what I do, but I absolutely hate being discovered on. I hate it. And whenever I join a discovery conversation, to your point, I am very much of the mindset, just show me what you do, like show me the product, show me the features, then we can have a conversation around it. And I don't know if there's a big element of discovery fatigue that is happening now. People feel exhausted, they genuinely feel tired, they feel like time is so precious, right? To give up 30 minutes or 45 minutes of your time, that's a big chunk of your day that you can spend doing things that you're actually going to get paid for. But it's how do you use those 30 and 45 minutes effectively? And ultimately, people want to see your product. They want to see what you have to offer. And that's the point at which they want to have a conversation. So a big focus for me this year in particular is how do we enable SDRs, AEs, AMs, CS, to have those meaningful conversations where we're actually adding value, rather than asking questions that frustrate the buyer, right? Because you will notice very quickly when your buyer or potential buyer on the other side is getting angry, annoyed, frustrated, losing interest, checking the phone, typing something to someone on Slack. But yeah.
Do you feel like, because a lot of people will bring account managers, customer success in, at the end, like the onboarding process? Do you feel like they should be brought in from the beginning?
I've been part of incredible sales processes where genuinely I told the AE, this was the best sales process I've been part of. Like, I wish every single sales process could look like that. And what they've done differently is, rather than ask me the questions, so what keeps you up at night? Is this a big challenge? Is this a challenge that others in the organization are facing? You know, what is the implication if we do solve this? What does it mean? And if I can give you back those 30 minutes, where would you be able to dedicate that time? Rather than doing all of that, what they started off with was, Malvina, in the last 3 months, I spoke to 20 individuals like yourself. And here are the top 5 challenges that I've heard they all face. Do these resonate with you? Oh my God, yes. And this is how they're approaching them. Have you considered doing something similar? No? Tell me more. What are they doing? What results are they seeing? And then I was genuinely hooked. And I think that's the difference.
Did you have something to
Yeah, I mean, look, what you've just described there, and we're probably going to jump into this later, is what buyers are craving from salespeople at the moment, right? Is that they want to know what those icebergs in the distance are. They want to know something that they can't access through the internet. We're probably going to have a round about marketing about this later, but that's okay, right? But there's so much information for buyers at the moment. There's too much information, right? What they want access to is information that they can't get anywhere else. Go back 30 years ago, the salesperson used to give that to them because we were the gatekeeper to all the information. So when they wanted something, they'd have to go and speak to a salesperson. Nowadays, they can go online, they can find out exactly what their problem is, diagnose it, and then eventually when they've made a decision, they speak to a salesperson. And then the salesperson then tries to learn about these problems. They're like, I already know this, just tell me the price and show me the product. Where we can add intrinsic value, deep value, is precisely that. Things that they can't access anywhere else. Customer stories, expertise, like knowledge that you have that they can't get anywhere else. And that for me is the big part of the value that the salesperson can bring to the experience. One last thing I'll say, apologies for hijacking this, but is that
It's passionate.
yeah, I'm deeply passionate about this because what we've got is really precious. Sales is incredibly precious and we need to look after it, we need to nurture it, right? Is that the value you bring is the experience you give the person you're selling to. That's the differentiated value. There's never been an easier or better time to stand out as a top class, top 5% salesperson just by giving them a better experience when we sell to them. That's what we need to do. We don't need evolution of sales. We need devolution of sales. Go back 30 years ago when they were experts in the problems in their market. Not experts on their product, no one gives a shit. Experts on the problems in their market. That's what really matters.
And speaking of being one of those top 5 performing reps and going the extra mile, Alice, I'm sure you've had so many experiences working with sales reps and lots of stories that I'm sure you'd be more than happy to share and success stories. But I guess the first question for you is, what's the most frustrating part that you see when people bring you into the sales process from the buyer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I just think like the bar is actually super low, like to be impressive today. Like this, it's the same old emails that I get in my inbox, the same old LinkedIn messages, connection, pitch straight away, like absolutely zero value added to my life, and straight away there's an ask there. They haven't taken even 5 minutes to look at the kind of things I talk about, the kind of things that I'm interested in, the problems that matter to me. And then, so it means that to cut through that noise is actually really, really easy. It's not a hard problem to solve. You just need to take a little bit more time, be a little bit more thoughtful. Like the things I was saying the other day, I was giving this example. We use Seismic, and a rep from their competitor, I can't remember, I don't actually remember what they were called, which isn't great. No, it wasn't Drift. It was the other big, it wasn't Showpad either, it was Highspot. And she introduced herself to me, and she'd read all of my latest LinkedIn posts, and so she said, I know that you care about X, Y, and Z, I also know that you use Seismic. And so I'm not actually asking for anything at this time. She was just offering me value around like the sales enablement space and like the problems that people were finding, and some of that really resonated with me. And so I probably will have a call with her just to chat through that more, because there are issues that we have around sales enablement that sounds like she could add value towards. And that's all it took. It didn't take like anything crazy from her side, and it was probably like, I don't know, half an hour job for her to do that video and a little bit of thought. So I guess the bar is low, and there's definitely room to like be able to cut through that noise. And we just got to take away this whole idea of like, I guess, copy and paste and mass spam and chuck something at all and hope it sticks type approach to things. And I think marketing is going through a similar evolution. Like, everything was around almost trickery, forcing people through this artificial funnel, trying to get them to fill in a form so we could gather their contact details just basically by clickbait without actually adding any value. And I think with sales, it's all been set up in a very similar way. It's like, how can we trick someone through a cold call opening line or a really good objection handling of this situation to take a 30-minute call and have this meeting, even though they're really probably unlikely to buy and it's not really going to add any value to their life, and I haven't done any real discovery of note. So I think it's just this whole, like, we can't trick buyers anymore. Like, they're educated and they want and deserve more from us.
Yeah, definitely.
You are getting a call from your seismic CSM tomorrow morning. For sure.
So obviously there's no secret here. There's this economic crisis that we don't want to talk about. It's a tough time out there at the moment. So Rory, from your standpoint, working with a buyer enablement platform, where does enablement fit into the buyer's ecosystem?
From a buyer enablement perspective?
Yeah.
I think it's like throughout the entire journey. From the first touch point, I think we focus too much on, we're solving like benefits and things like that. We're not focusing on impact enough. And I think that's kind of what you were touching on, Erin. I think also, just to kind of go back to what you were saying as well, 5% of a buyer's time is spent with individual vendors. It's like nothing. It's decreased massively. So that experience, 86% of buyers value the experience as much as the product or service. So I think having that mindset is like, it's not an if, it's a must now, from the first touch point. So yeah, I think you've got to think ahead of like the full journey that they're going through. It's a nightmare for them. Like, has anyone bought software before? A few of you. Did anyone have like a brilliant time and message the salesperson afterwards and say thanks? I really enjoyed that.
No.
I did once, yes.
Okay, cool.
She's an enablement. All she does is buy products.
Yeah. So if you think about it, like buying software or service, anything like in B2B, it's risky. You've got ROI to calculate, content to consume, competitors to compare. There is so much that goes on, and for that person, like it's pressure on them internally. They've got maybe referrals that they've been given and things like that. And I think this kind of like buyer enablement, when does it come in? It's like throughout, from start to finish and beyond. It isn't a process. I think it's a mindset, and I think that's the kind of shift that we need to have.
Yeah, definitely. That's what, when we were talking about planning this event, we said like, let's structure it into multithreading and agility and procurement, and actually it shouldn't be so structured. We shouldn't be having these different sections that people have to like do as a tick list to get through for the buyer journey. It's just, you should look at the buyer as the person that you're adapting your whole sales process to, and they are at the center of everything that you're doing. There was a question that was pre-submitted from the audience that I'd love your thoughts on, Rory, is how are you effectively using data to accurately predict buyer intent?
Buyer intent, yeah, it's a big one at the moment. It depends where you're getting the data from. Like on our side, the way we use Trumpet is we start to get insights into when people are interacting with the microsites, what they're doing. And I think that helps you to identify, is there engagement here? Are they actually revisiting this? Are they sharing it with their team? Whether it's Trumpet, another tool, anything like that that can help you understand, did they open my email? Is like layer one, and we've all got that. But going deeper, whether it's a PDF, it's a Loom recording, it's a video, anything like that, you've got to be relying on data to understand what deals to focus on, especially in this current market. Like, it is tricky, but I think Hector, you told me about happy is, and that's always stuck with me. In sales, like, it's very easy to have a conversation and be like, oh yeah, they loved it. That's not always true. Like, is there actual intent there after the conversation? Is it actually moving forward? Are they discussing this with their team? You can't always be in their shoes, in their office, seeing who they're talking to. So leveraging certain technology will help you unlock that data so that you can spend time on the right opportunities and invest in the right champions to make their life easy. Yeah, not easy to get all that data.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else got any adds on, Alice?
Yeah, I guess it's a difficult one. I come at it from like a marketing perspective, and we've taken quite an extreme view, and like we actually don't try and assume any intent until it's declared, and that's like our philosophy. So again, putting the buyer first and not trying to put them through an artificial funnel of any kind. We don't run any like content, ebook plays, any of that stuff. Like, we don't use like intent data to go cold outbound. Like, it's all about enabling the buyer to move themselves in market when they're ready. and when they actually declare that intent. So I come at it from probably like a very extreme perspective, potentially. But yeah.
No, I mean, there's shakes from Erin's head, so
It's not extreme at all. I mean, buyer intent is eliciting the right things from the customer, the buyer, sorry. It's like, your actions don't mean anything, right? Like we have a sales process and we're like, oh, I sent them a proposal. That means there's an 86% chance of it coming in. It's like, that means absolutely nothing, right? We need to care about buyer-led engagement, what the buyer is asking us, what the buyer is showing us, what the buyer is doing. The buyer is the hero of the story. There is no sales, there is only buyers, right? And I totally agree with you. Do you know how I found out my wife wanted to marry me? I asked her, she said yes. Do you know that I found out that she was going to marry me? She fucking turned up to the wedding. That was the best intent I ever had. It's like, okay, great. That was fabulous, right? And this is kind of the point. I didn't tell my lady she's going to marry me until I asked her. That was it, right? Is that we've got to, as salespeople specifically, we've got to elicit this information from the buyer, and then we observe behaviour and we support them and we give them confidence in the decisions they're trying to make and help them through that process.
Don't ask your buyers if they'll marry you.
That's kind of what sales is a lot like proposing to someone, is that you never know they're going to say yes, but you're constantly looking for the right evidence and the signs of intent that there's a strong chance of them saying yes. That's essentially what sales is. I couldn't hold a gun to my wife's head and force her to marry me, which we'd love to do with our prospects, right? But we can't, unfortunately. But there is a great deal of crossover between that. Women will never understand it, so you don't have to ask for the marriage. But,
hey, the world's changing.
Maybe they can, yeah. Fair enough, but yeah, that's my 2 cents. But I think you're everything you've said so far is absolutely spot on from a marketing perspective. I could not agree more. And I actually thought we were going to disagree a lot more, so I'm very impressed.
My last question before we get to a couple of questions from the public. From you guys. We're not. From you guys, before we have a quick break, so Erin's the stat man, and he came to me with this study from G2 that said only 10% find vendor-led content influential on buying decisions. And Malvina, I know that you have a podcast yourself, you're a content queen, and I just wanted to ask, what do you think is lacking in people's sales content? We've touched on delivering with insight, like Alice mentioned, doing your research about the buyer so that you have that little bit more leeway to get in and really relate to them. But what are some bits of advice that you can give to us?
I think a lot of buyers are looking for companies that are forward thinking, right? That are not only thinking about what's happening today, what's happening in the present, but really, what is the aspiration a year and a half, 2 years from now? How is the market going to change and evolve, and how we need to change and evolve, right? What's hot and popular today and is going to help you get to your target might not necessarily be the same exact thing that you're going to need a year from now. So I think for a lot of these companies is, how can we be forward-looking, be those thought leaders, but actually show the buyer that, hey, we're here with you on this journey and we're going to guide you on this journey. Not just guide you today to help make the right decision for today, but really the right decision going forward.
Yeah, I would also add, I just also think the bar for that content's really low as well, just to put that out there. I don't think, I think there's not, we do this thing at Cognism where all of our content is subject matter expert led, and that's that's the bar, it has to be. And there's no sort of junior content writer writing through desk research using ChatGPT, whatever it is. None of that is going to cut the mustard for us. It has to be subject matter led, expert led, and they need to be doing that role or doing that thing today, currently, so they're learning and evolving as well all the time. And I think that is not the same standard of content that most people are aspiring to or delivering, and that's probably also why a lot of people are underwhelmed by what they see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to be that expert in your field, don't you? We always say that at Wiser Elite, people, the recruitment team, yes, you can be a fantastic recruiter, but there are so many recruiters out there. You can be a fantastic salesperson, but again, how many of you are selling in exactly the same way? So the thing that's going to make you stand out is the insight that you're putting out on your platform, the thought leadership that you're talking about, so that you're actually an expert and more of that consultant approach. I know you wanted to say something.
No, I was enjoying that.
I did want to add something to that though, and I think this is where we fundamentally disagree actually, is that
you just wanted to disagree.
I've been put here to play devil's avocado, but the research shows that actually there's too much thought leadership out there for the buyer at the moment, right? So what does this mean? It's creating analysis paralysis in the buyer, because there's so much good quality thought leadership and some of it actually conflicting. So they're sitting there going, oh, this is a brilliant white paper on this over here, and then there's this white paper here that's brilliant, but they're actually conflicting, but they're both brilliant, right? It's like going to the doctor and getting 5 doctors and getting 5 brilliant diagnoses, but they're all really, really different. So this is creating indecision in the buyer at the moment. The silent killer in all of our pipelines are probably the biggest thing affecting pipeline at the moment. It's not top of funnel, it's actually indecision that's sitting in the pipeline, right? So if you've read any of the brilliant work by Matt Dixon and Ted McKenna in the Jolt effect, it's saying something super, super interesting, that the role of the salesperson now is not to keep piling more content on the customer. It's actually to help curate the content and the information that they have available and let them know what's valuable and what's not valuable, what they should ignore and actually what they should be focusing on. So the role of the salesperson now is slightly different. The more content that we keep giving them, actually what we're doing is we're increasing the chance of indecision. So let me give you a statistic around that. About 50,
Again, we love statistics.
I know, it's almost like they represent fact. Yeah. It's mental when you think about it. Right? Sorry, that was a bit cutting, but it's a really important statistic, right? So 53% of opportunities are ending in no decision because the customer is afraid of making a decision. There's risk in the deal, right? When we go and sort of dial up the FOMO, the fear of messing up, send them more content, send them more pricing, that number now jumps up to 84%. We are better as sellers of doing absolutely nothing and walking away from the deal than we are of going in there and actually trying to influence the deal even more. So I take your point that there is a low bar for content. I particularly think sales created content. I actually think marketing teams now, because there's this smartness arms race that we've got to get this brilliant thought leadership, we've got to go and do our own research. That's actually creating a problem for sellers for buyers, where there's too much quality content out there. And it's creating analysis paralysis, and this is being borne out in all the statistics we're seeing at the moment as well.
But potentially the missing link is like that sales and marketing aren't working closely aligned enough.
100%.
Like how they can actually derive value for that with them.
I totally agree with you, is that there are two silos that operate in isolation of each other that both have the end goal, like an unhappy marriage. Not to keep bringing it back to my marriage.
You're going to be getting a call from your wife as well as Simon.
What you're saying is really, really interesting, actually, is that the biggest thing affecting revenue organisations at the moment is the inability to break down silos and actually put the buyer at the front of the story. Marketing are going off and doing their own thing, sales are going off and doing their own thing, and there's a complete disconnect, and they're so disparate, these departments at the moment. But when was the last time you sat down genuinely with the sales and marketing department all together in one room? Genuinely, put your hand up if it's been in the last month. Last week.
That's just because you're less KOs.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
there is a massive, I think you're spot on. I think, even though they don't agree with me, I think you're bang on.
I'm just going to tag on. Yeah, you go first.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I think just in terms of content, I don't think content solves everything. I think you can have incredible content produced by marketing teams, but the challenge appears when sellers don't necessarily know when to use the content, how to use the content, how to position the content, and actually make it beneficial. Like, how many of you have actually read the latest white paper that your marketing team has put out? Genuinely.
Such deep spend.
Okay, all right, yeah, right? Okay, maybe we've read the bullet points, like this paper covers X, Y, and Z, but very few sellers actually read the content that is being produced by marketing teams. So how can we talk about it? How can we make a recommendation, right? Jolt effect, another big point in that book is the fact that sellers are so much more effective when they're able to make a recommendation.
Yeah.
So I think even when you read it, it's understand it. Like you can read it but still have no clue.
Exactly, right? And that's where that alignment between sales and marketing really comes into play. We have this content. What do we do with it? How do we use it? Step number one, you have to read it, But the power of being able to make a recommendation at every single step of the buyer journey is what ultimately will get you that sale and will allow the buyer to say, you know what, I feel 100% confident that I'm making the right decision. I love it when someone says, Malvina, I recommend that this be the next step. okay, sounds good. Like, I'm not going to turn around and say, no, that does not sound like a good recommendation.
Rory, now should be able to add on that.
I think as well that salespeople have seen, they've kind of been taught, drop in content in outreach. So like use it as another touch point. So they're actually not seeing it as value, they're kind of seeing it as a tool, but not really focusing on the value behind it. And you're right, they're not actually reading it. They're like, I'm just going to drop in some content, like that will count as a touch point. And that's the wrong mindset again. And I know we're going into solutions in the second half, but I think that the kind of answer to all of this, I'd really recommend everyone reading an article on sense-making sales. It's providing buyers the right information at the right time, in the right format, in the right way. Basically, it's like you could easily send them a big blog, a white paper, anything like that, but just saying like, here it is, but actually the highlights for you are X, Y, and Z, or here's, I could send you the hour-long demo that we just did, but actually I've just gone and recorded a 5-minute version that you can easily share with your team, because I know you do not have time to watch an hour, and actually no one ever watches that hour-long demo. That's the approach there, a lot easier said than done.
And vendor agnostic content as well.
Yeah.
Like, you think
So
that GT report said that 36% don't trust big content because it's not agnostic. It's actually, it's not impartial.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. Like picking out those points, making the buyer's life so much easier, and it shows that you actually care, you understand what they want. We're going to pause here because I know we've got a next section to get through, and I want you guys to have another drink. But we'll ask about our pizzas. Pizza for you. We'll open the floor to 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll do a bigger Q&A at the end. So, Carrie.
Seller here. Very worried. Obviously expectation from, I wish all the sales leaders I work with are in the room, but they're not. In terms of outbound, obviously there's still an expectation that we need to do that and we need to actually prospect to our key kind of new businesses. So how do you recommend we do that? Obviously, given the fact that most emails go unanswered, most cold calls probably aren't the best way. How do we do that? Or don't we do that?
Yeah, I think everyone's looking for like a panacea at the moment, where it's like, if you do this tactic, you will get 1 million leads. And it's like, it's not the reality of it, right? And the biggest opportunity for sellers in 2023, I think, is right under your nose, but you're using it in completely the wrong way. I think there's 2 things that we should focus on. The first one is LinkedIn. 80% of social leads last year came through LinkedIn. Like 80%, that's crazy. Social leads came through LinkedIn. But the problem is that we use LinkedIn as a push mechanism, not a pull mechanism. So you need to be able to actually build a profile on LinkedIn, talk about the problems that are resonating with your buyers, and be fucking patient. Like, you don't just put a post out and then go, right, I'm going to call you immediately and try and close you. It's like, can you imagine walking down the street and someone smiled at you and you run over to them asking to marry you, right? Now, again, like, this is part of the problem, and I feel real sympathy for salespeople, because you do have the pressure of a target bearing down on you, right? And it needs to be kind of an organizational capability, not just one seller's going off and social selling. But the other opportunity is video. Like, video is massive. 30% open rates, 58% of people watch a 60-second video to completion. It's about a business problem. It's like, you got to use this stuff in your favor. The telephone is the most effective way of closing business. The problem is, no one wants to talk to you on the telephone. Email is the worst way of getting your personality across. What do we all use? Email. Customer doesn't get back to us, what do we do again? We email them. We're just pissing the buyer off. I think video and LinkedIn are really the ways forward. I really do, and it's how I generate leads through LinkedIn. All of my business comes through LinkedIn.
I would have voiced that you would just play that back to everyone in the organization.
but again, it's really interesting that you say that, though, because I think that leadership doesn't get it. They just think, just open up the spam cannons, these like outreach products, and then just spin it out to the world and hope some of it sticks. The problem with throwing shit at the wall is that you end up with a wall covered in shit. That's what we've got to let leadership know really, really quickly.
I'm so ready for our LinkedIn post tomorrow. This is the first time. Write that down. Right.
Great question, really good.
Yeah, really good question. One more, and remember we're going on to like how to actually change this in the next section. So, yes.
So I'm a founder and I come from the world of advertising, so I'm probably the only one that is not a salesperson and knows nothing about sales here, so just literally crash the party. So essentially, after 2 years of product development, we went into market, and now I have to do the sales, obviously, I'm the founder. What would be like the 3 things that you would say someone that does not come from the world of sales should have in mind, like the sort of tricks to actually go into this world of buyer enablement moment if like literally you know nothing about sales, which I do know a bit now because I've been practicing it, but then essentially starting from ground zero.
I can give you 2 quick ones.
Okay.
Obviously, we always say like no features, benefits, but really just focused on impact for that person, for that business. Like that should be your focus from the first point that you speak to them. The second is don't tell the story. And it really sucks like founder to founder. Like you want to share the vision, what you're building, like why you built it, where it started. Honestly, people don't care. They've got on that call limited time. They want to know like what it does, how much, see it in action. Is it going to work for them? How do they get started? It's just a very frank conversation. Like, I think that's the thing now, we have to respect people's time. So let's just cut to the chase, invite the elephant into the room and get on with it. So yeah, I'm not saying that you do already do the kind of story, but just one thing I'd say is you can avoid that and just make the best use of time.
Did you learn that the hard way?
I did. Art is really. It actually wasn't a Trumpet, it was a previous startup, and unfortunately I learned it there, and we were kind of told to like do these slides on the founders, and they'd worked at Google and they'd done this, that, and the other. I remember we sold into hospitality, and I was speaking to this hotel director. He literally looked at me and he went, "Rory, just stop. I don't give a shit." He's like, "Honestly, I do not care. Like, just honestly, the product." I was like, "Oh my god!" I went back to the founders, and they were like, "What? But that's like the starting side." I was like, "Apparently, people don't care about it."
They don't care about the story of how we got here.
Yeah, only if they are, then you can tell them.
Exactly. Thank you so much for that question. Hopefully that helped. Right, we will break for 10. So if you guys want to come back at 5 past, and then we'll get to the actionables. Thank you so much for staying. We are so excited about this part of the evening. All of the events that we do with Wiser Elite, we want to talk about topics that are very interesting to salespeople at the moment, but we want you guys to go away with tangible things that you can start implementing. So let's get into the nitty-gritty, start speaking about how we actually start doing this, how we can be agile and adapt to the buyer's behaviour. But the first question I wanted to start, and as well, like having you, Alice, here as a CMO, is we always speak about sales funnels and how you should have marketing at the top, and it's something that you mentioned in the previous section, and then filtrating through to the sales, and then going through to the buyer and coming through as a funnel. But actually, you guys at Cognism have done this really, really well, and you think there should be no funnel. So why is that? And then as a tangible, how can we attack that?
Okay, yeah, I guess like this just comes back to my philosophy on marketing, which is like that there is no linear buying journey or funnel anymore. Like the way that people buy is like all over the place, and they're looking and interacting with our companies across multiple touch points, lots of which can't be tracked, our social, WhatsApp groups, whatever it may be. And there is absolutely no way that we can be all over all of that data and understand exactly like all of those touch points and exactly what point of that journey they're in. And also things change like in their environments that will ultimately decide whether they become more ready to purchase or not. And that happens without our knowledge most of the time. So I think it's just like understanding that that is where we're operating as a fundamental, so that when you're maybe structuring like your outreach cadences, sales up cadences, whatever it may be, from a sales perspective, you're not trying to say like, okay, this is email 1, which is the first time they've ever heard of our company and of us, and so I'm going to put this message in, like our original value proposition, and this is going to be email 2, and it's about a case study, because now they've heard like step 1, they're going to be interested in step 2. Like, they probably never even read email 1 and probably deleted it straight away. If they do happen to read email 2, it's probably like potluck, like not to be brutal, but that's just the reality of it. So I think just like dispelling all of those myths, and so kind of trying to think of it like more of like an always on Netflix style interaction with your like prospects is probably like a good way of thinking.
Yeah, definitely. And to touch on like different touch points that you're going through with your cadences, Malvina, what best practices would you say, and I know you mentioned before of like bringing in different people into the sales process, but what would you say is the best structure, and do you feel like it should follow a similar structure and like a script for all of your touch points for each buyer, or do you think it should be very flexible?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I'm going to actually share an example from today. Not so much top of funnel SDR conversation, more of an AE conversation, where the AE goes to me So look, Malvina, after the first meeting, I would typically send out this email, and these are the 5 pieces of content that I send each time, and I want to have them included in the email because I don't want to have to pick and choose each time. It's too time consuming to add it one by one, so I want to create a template and use it each time. Okay? What do you think was going through my head when I heard that? You might think, actually, that's not a big deal, right? He's just trying to be efficient and effective with his time. But there's a fundamental problem that we spoke about before the break, which is sellers don't necessarily know what content to use and how to use it because they're constantly defaulting to the 5 pieces of content that they do know by heart. Okay? So to take this back to Alice's point, right, sales isn't a linear journey. You can't have a template of 5 pieces of collateral that you're going to share every single time. Because what might work for one particular buyer is not going to necessarily work for another buyer, right? And that's where you have to be fluid and you have to adapt and you have to ask yourself, if I'm sharing something, if I'm sharing a case study, does it resonate? Does it bring value? Is Malvina going to read it and say, oh my gosh, Susie sounds just like me and she had the same exact problem? Or is she going to read it and say, oh, this actually has nothing to do with what I'm trying to fix? Right? So it's being fluid, being able to adapt and change and genuinely put ourselves in that mindset. We often try to take so many shortcuts because we think we're going to be more effective and we're going to be more efficient, but actually we're harming ourselves, right? So we need to be nimble. We need to be agile. Does it require effort? Yes. Is it going to require time? Yes. Is it worth it? Hell yes.
Yeah, but that fluidity, some people, I know we've got people in this audience that sell enterprise, is different to the different markets that you sell to. Erin, I know that we spoke about this when we were discussing for the evening. Do you think there's a difference with that fluidity between SMB, mid-market, enterprise? Oh gosh.
I'm just trying to think if I care is what I'm saying, is that no, I mean this in the nicest possible way, but like we've there's a problem. One of the problems we have in sales at the moment is that we're far too rational and academic in the way that we look at selling, right? 95% of purchasing is emotional, right? So Dr. Robert Zortman completely changed the world on this, is that you don't buy things with rationality. So we do these stupid exercises with buyers where we sit there and we go, oh, we're going to do an ROI calculator and we're going to sit down with you and we're going to punch in some numbers and we're going to spit a number out the end and both of us don't fucking believe it, so I don't know why we're doing this in the first place. And then I'm going to sit there and I'm going to pretend that I'm going to turn you into a billionaire overnight, right? So the biggest thing we can do is, here's how I position it, is that we've got to stop selling and we've got to stop helping, which sounds like a Hallmark card, which is not designed to do that. But what the buyer needs at the moment is an agent, right? Someone who's going to sit there and say, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to make sense of all of this stuff for you, right? You've got a challenge, you've got a problem. There's an iceberg in the distance that you don't know what's coming to you. There's a load of information out there. You don't know what you're doing. And guess what? When you do eventually sign a contract, it's your fucking name that's written on that contract. And if it goes wrong, you're going to be the person who's to blame. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work with you to come up with a decision. That decision might not be to buy my product. That's fine. The decision might be to do absolutely nothing. If it's the right decision to make, I'm going to help you make that decision. And then when you work backwards from that end goal, everything should be dictated by that. It shouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to send this case study because I've got this case study, or I'm going to do this because I've got this. It doesn't matter whether you're in enterprise or whether you're in SMB or whether you're in mid-market. It does become more complex in enterprise for the simple fact that on average, there's 11 buyers involved in a buying decision in 2022. 11 buyers, right? That's 55 communication points you've got with people. And that's only one way. If it's bilateral, that's 110 communication points you've got with someone. That's a crazy amount of communication. So your job in that process is to help the buying committee make a decision. It might not be to buy your product. That's absolutely okay. So then what happens is
it's not. No, I'm kidding.
Of course it is. We said we weren't going to disagree tonight, and we're fine to disagree. And the statistics born out of this show that reciprocity is more important, because you've probably been recommended a plumber before that someone didn't even use. They just had a great experience with that plumber, and they've gone, use this guy, he's really, really good. And this is the point, is that and what we do inadvertently is we start raising the value of sellers in the buyer's eyes, because the bar's so low at the moment. And when we start talking about cadences, when we start talking about content, when we start talking about this shit, I don't care enough about it, right? What I think we need to care about is the buyer. We've got to start standing by the buyer, arm in arm, and giving them confidence in the decisions they are making and confidence in themselves to make the right decision. As soon as we do this, we change the game overnight. That's what me and Raf do in our job. We turn around and say, you're probably sitting at the moment you're overwhelmed. Forget all that. We're not here to sell you something. Let me tell you what your problem is. Help you understand the impact of that problem. And then you can make a decision. They sometimes pick us, they sometimes don't. That's what we need to do as buyers. So apologies if that came across rude, but we get caught up in the academic detail of selling. It's not an academic art. It's an art of emotion. And the buyers want to feel really comfortable in the decision that they're making. My voice went a bit high there. That means I really care about it.
No, I don't think it does come across as rude. You're just being honest and like, this is what we're here to talk about. There is that shift. So we can't think of the old school way of sales and only thinking about your own sales process and all of these things that you've been trained. I was speaking to somebody in the audience just now, like I'm not in sales, but when I look at sales, I'm like, it's just people. So like that's what you just need to strip it back to essentially.
There is no sales process.
Yeah.
There's only a buyer journey.
Yeah.
There is no marketing funnel. To Alice's point is that, I didn't mean to come across patronising, but no. I really like the point that Alice is making there is that like, the buyer jumps all over the place and we've got to meet them in the middle somewhere. That's our job, both in marketing and sales. We don't have this linear process where they go, I'm going to turn up today and do this, this and this. That's a great point that Alice has made. I really like it.
Yeah, so true. You mentioned, Erin, like there's 11 touch points, which is crazy. And one of those touch points that I'm sure you all speak about a lot in your daily job is procurement. Rory, you said you need to make procurement your champion. Yeah. Why? And how do you do that?
Because it can be the biggest headache in the world. And I think salespeople leave it too late to kind of, not everyone, I'm sure everyone here does a great job, but often it comes up too late in the conversation and it can lead to deal stalling. I think it's, as Erin mentioned, like you're basically becoming the champion's partner to guide them through this process. You don't want the champion to become a messenger and going back and forth. You basically want to say to them, I know what's going to happen next because I've sold software before, I've dealt with CMOs and VPs and all of that jazz. I can anticipate this is probably going to come up. Have you dealt with your procurement team before? Yes or no? Yeah, cool. You probably know what's going to happen. Let's go through that. If not, this is a typical process and it's actually good to get those conversations going now because honestly, that go live date, it can suddenly get stalled for another 3 months because someone in procurement is like, hold up, we haven't signed X, Y, and Z. Whether it's security docs, it's T's and C's, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So I think, it comes like it invites the elephant in the room. You're not being presumptive and saying this deal is going to happen, but just saying it's for both of our benefit to get that conversation going now. So I think just being direct, like you're trying to help them and just making them aware of that is super important.
And when you say
on that, sorry, let me interrupt.
Are you from procurement?
No.
Thank God. Get out.
Expansion sales. I would love each and everyone's opinion on introducing a mutual activity plan or MAPs, as we call them.
Love that.
Would that be helpful at this point? At which point, Malvina, would you like to see that, or would you feel comfortable in?
Yeah, 100%. It's like the talk of the town. If anyone isn't using mutual action or success plans, you better get to it ASAP. And yes, you can use Trumpet for lots of other tools, but
soft plug.
Didn't see that one. But basically, like a mutual action plan is not just creating accountability, which is super important. Like we need to go and do X, Y, Z. You need to do A, B, C, and together this will be achieved. But it's also painting a picture of a timeline. Like these are the steps involved, and it's just giving clarity to the buyer because. Again, going back to that point I said earlier, like buying software is not fun, it's a pain in the ass, it's risky. So if you can just help them understand what lies ahead, and also that they can then share that with their team, peace of mind. Like they feel a lot more comfortable and like they're in trusted advisors' hands. They're not kind of going up against a process where they feel like they're having to call and ask for information and like learn. You're educating with a mutual action plan. What format you want to take then is entirely up to you, but I think it's integral. Putting the time into something like that, not just using a templated version, like that's very, very easy, but putting the time into investing into one that is like bespoke to them will show that you've gone the extra mile. I think everything that every salesperson should be doing right now should be focused on the quality of engagement with your prospects from start to finish, not quantity. It's been too easy to do that. That's automation left, right, center.
It's a really good point.
And I don't know if you guys, whoever wants to take the answer to this question, but I think when you speak to a buyer, you as a sales rep would probably like lead that conversation to show them that you're the person that's giving value and bringing some insight to that journey, and that you're explaining to them how your software can uncover their pain points. But when you're bringing in procurement, and I don't know if Alice, you have any thoughts on this, but do you feel like the sales rep should lead that meeting, or should they follow? Like, how do you approach that, I guess, balance of the relationship?
I think you want to enable, as a salesperson, you want to enable whoever it is in the organisation to be able to own that conversation with procurement, because I think we all have a fundamental mistrust of salespeople. Coming at it from a CMO who's been missold to a few times, and so I think it's more powerful if it comes from the internal representation. And so your job is to enable them to be able to manage that process and that stakeholder as effectively as possible and navigate that. And it might be the first time they're doing it, depending on their experience. So I think that's, very similar to what you said.
Can you tell if someone's mis-selling to you?
I think I think you learn as a buyer as you go through the process in how to minimize the risk of that. There will always be functionality and aspects of a product that don't live up to your expectations. And ultimately, where you want to dive really deep are those that will actually fundamentally break what you're trying to achieve if it doesn't work for you. So integrations, are they actually native? Do they work as well? Not on a roadmap that's I don't know, we're saying Q2 and it's actually going to be Q4. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of questions that I would always be very, very, very aware of, as someone who's definitely been told something's coming in a month and it's never been shipped.
Too many yeses.
Yeah, too many yeses.
Yeah, Malvina?
Yeah, I think just to add to mutual launch plans or mutual action plans, I think the final point on that plan should never be signature, right? It should always be what happens post-signature. When I'm in discovery meetings, the thing that genuinely freaks me out is when someone tells me our product is highly customizable. That, for some reason, triggers alarm bells in my head where I'm thinking this is going to take me ages to set up. This is going to be a nightmare. How many hours am I going to have to dedicate? I don't have this time, right? But we need to get something up and running. So I think now, more so than ever, that point of activation and going live for your buyers is ever more important, right? Great, we can make a decision and I can make that recommendation, but I'm also going to show you how quickly and easily you're going to be up and running and actually using the tool. And that's sometimes something that sellers forget, right? We often are so focused on, are we going to make that decision? Are they going to buy? Yes, awesome, happy days, CSM, here you go. But it's how do we give them that support and that comfort throughout that sales process as well. But to Alice's point, genuinely be honest and open about what you are committing to. Don't overpromise. Oh yes, I'm going to spend 5 hours every single day with you. We're going to map this out. And then you're like, great, I'm ready to get going. Okay, well, here's the workbook. Once you've completed sections 1 to 5, let us know, then we'll jump on another call. Right? That's scary.
Yeah, and speaking of getting to that signature stage and closing, we had somebody pre-submit a question who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but I would love to ask it because I think it's really important. And Rory, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this, but she says, I struggle with closing the prospect at later stages in the deal, i.e. we get to the point where we are a vendor of your choice or final two, and I get awkward about directly asking them, are you going ahead? Do you have any tips for how to be more direct or how to word this in a way that doesn't sound like I'm just chasing my commission?
Golden ticket answer. Yeah. I don't think it comes in that part of the journey. I don't think it's when you're at that meeting or at that point in the conversation, having something that's direct or whatever it is. I think that's resulted in not having them bought in earlier on and not being multi-threaded, and not just for the buzzword and all of that, but you haven't proven the value that they're as excited and they're as motivated to push this forward. It goes back to the indecision piece, and that's what it is. They clearly don't have enough confidence. I think driving confidence is fundamental nowadays because there's so much risk involved for the buyer, the impact and everything like that. So to be super honest, I don't think there is a specific answer for that, apart from ensuring that throughout you're doing everything you can to support the buyer, to help them become more of a champion, and also make the other stakeholders champions as well. It isn't just that one person. Too much pressure on their shoulders.
Do you feel like it should be closed before you even get to that point? Like you should know?
Pretty much. Yeah, you should have closed it before it's signed. Yeah, easier said than done. But I think as well, it goes back to like mutual action plans. That whole concept is saying it's not just us like signing this deal. That's not what we're trying to get to. It's the journey ahead, and like removing any fear that it's going to be a pain in the ass. It's going to take time, and whether that is the kind of seamless onboarding, introducing CS as early as possible, or even senior decision makers in your company to show the commitment to the deal. There's a lot that can be done, and I know those are tips people have already probably heard and tried, but I think you've got to double down on this now.
Aaron, you made a face.
I just wanted to contribute.
Yeah.
What
face?
It was this. It wasn't directed at you, mate. Is it? Yeah, I kind of agree with what Rory was saying to a point, right? So closing isn't this event that happens at the end of a conversation. Closing is something that happens throughout the whole process. Your objective as a salesperson is to constantly collect commitment during the process. Now, people shit themselves at the end because they think that the final no, the final yes is the yes. It's not. When someone agrees to buy your product, we know that they've now got to go and navigate a buying process, which in itself is incredibly difficult. The way we think about it is that we try and get the customer comfortable with us asking that question. So it would go something like this. Look, as you can imagine, a large part of my job is separating from the serious from the curious when it comes to solving problems like this. It appears that your organisation is really dedicated to solving this problem. I just want to check at this stage. Are you motivated to buy a product like this? Yes. Are we the vendor of choice? No. Okay, cool. Let's have a conversation about that. Or, yes, we are. Okay, great. To your point, well, look, would you like me to now show you how people typically buy software like this? Yeah, we'd love to see that. Okay, cool. Well, look, what we find is actually having a plan in place gets it over the line. Would you like me to share with you our mutual engagement plan and we can talk about what the steps are necessary to do that? Now, I'm going to use an analogy. I'm going to use weddings for the analogy.
Really?
Yeah, I know. It just come to me, right? But if you've ever organised a wedding, right, you phone up a venue, right? What's the first question the venue asks you when you phone up?
Date.
When are you getting married? You phone up the flower people, they say, what's the first question they ask you?
She said yes.
Separate question, my friend. You phone up the flower people, what's the first question they ask you?
What's the date?
When's the date, right? You phone up your favourite fucking, I don't know, Norwegian metal band. What's the first question they ask? Like, when's the wedding, right? So everything is culminating towards an end event, right? Without that end day, you're hoping that all of your friends, all of your family turn up at the right venue at the right time with your favourite Norwegian metal band there. If you don't have that date, what's the point? So we have to make it really clear. We use the term implementation date as opposed to a contract sign date. So when do you want to start extracting value from the product or service? Here, okay, great. Well, let's aim towards that date together. But again, this isn't about us as salespeople thrusting it on them. Let me fill out a mutual engagement plan with you. And you're like, Jesus Christ, what is this that you've brought up? It's scary, right? Would you like me to show you how people typically buy a product like ours? I'd love to see that because I need bloody help. There's one thing that you have to have, right? When you're building out multiple champions, the most important thing, obviously influence and access to the economic buyer is really important, but personal drivers is the most important thing. If I asked you to go to the shop for me now, buy my weekly shop, pay for it, come back, unload it, put it into the cupboards in the right place, and there wasn't a compelling reason for you to do that, imagine how quickly you'd tell me to fuck off. Imagine if you thought at the end of it you were going to get a promotion, or you're going to get more time on your hands so you can go and see your daughter's piano recital, or you can actually make your life and your job easier, then you'll fight to go and fill out my shopping list. That's what we miss in champions. It's not a champion unless we've got a deep, intrinsic personal motivator that's going to drive the deal. And also, we need more than one champion. This isn't bloody 1996. You need more than one champion. There's 11 buyers involved in the decision-making process. So when we're filling out a mutual engagement plan, it should be a collaboration between 4 or 5 people. Don't roll your eyes. This is sales. It's hard, right? It's amazing that people buy anything. It is incredible to me that people buy anything. So we've got to help. Sorry.
Just to add to that, like part of buyer enablement as well is if you're creating multiple champions, these other stakeholders, the value you're trying to, create for them is very, very different. Like from a CFO to a CMO to the actual admin to the actual users, and that's the thing. Like what just worked for the champion is very, very different to the team you're then doing like team training call, whatever it might be. So I think. Again, that goes back to this kind of complacency in sales of like, oh, I'll just put people into email outreach or I'll use a template. that does not work if you're trying to build more than one champion as well.
Alice, I'd love to get your thought. Like, how do you work with champions from the buyer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, well, it honestly just comes down to deeply understanding like what their motivations are. And it comes back to this like that you buy through emotionally, you don't buy from like, yeah, it's not as simple as we all think, and you can't just create a process and that's going to lead to an end result. So there is no shortcutting it. Like, you have to spend the time to understand what really motivates them. I always just say that B2B is B2C, like there's no B2B, B2C, like you're ultimately selling to a human at the end of the day. That's the same whether it's B2C or B2B. They have interests, hobbies and everything else, it's very similar. But ultimately, like the only slight thing that might differ is like it's a more complex process and there's more people involved. But it still means that like the understanding and the things that you need to like get under the surface of are very much the same, whether it's B2B or B2C, in order to be successful. They still play golf, they go to the gym, they care about their children, their family. Like, these are the things that ultimately are going to motivate them. They want to get a promotion so that they can do better to deliver for their family, whatever it is. And if you can like actually understand all of those pieces, then you're going to be far more successful. And so it's hard and it's more work, but ultimately it pays off.
Just to add very briefly to that, there's a framework that I'd recommend everyone. I'll try and go give you homework, which is the jobs to be done framework, which really ties into that. It will kind of change your mindset of like going beyond the what is their use case to like what is the problem we're solving for that specific person.
Did you have a question on that?
Yep. Regarding several champions, what is the definition of champions? How do you define it for yourself when you say you need to have multiple ones?
So there's 4 or 5 key pieces of criteria that make someone a champion, right? Number 1 is that they have a personal drive or motivation within the organisation. Number 2, they can influence the opportunity, right? So whether that's they report directly to the economic buyer or they have some degree of influence within the opportunity. Number 3 actually is interesting, is that they do the things they say they're going to do. You're all nodding because you've all sat there and gone, oh my God, he didn't fill out that 90-page spreadsheet I asked him to fill out, right? Of course not, right? We need to enable that last piece there of doing things, helping them do the things they want to do. They also give you access to information, which is really, really important. But one piece of advice I'd give both salespeople and CS people, or account management, which are fundamentally the same thing, is that if you think about the value pyramid, right, you've got individual, departmental, and organizational. You need to have a champion at each stage of that. Someone who is an individual, could be an end user, someone who is a departmental head where they're striving to achieve a departmental goal, and someone who's tied deeply into a strategic objective. The one piece of advice I give you this year, particularly this year in 2023, with the economy teetering at the moment, right, is that if you are selling a product and you are not aligning it to strategic objectives of the business, pack up and go fucking home. Genuinely. If your business case is, oh, we're going to save you 6 hours a week, no one gives a shit. If you have to tie it to strategic objectives of the organisation, they will give you budget, they will create budget if you can help them achieve the big, scary, hairy goals that they're looking to achieve this year. So think about your champion. If they're articulating value based in amount of time that's being saved or amount of people who are going to be happy, you're never going to win. You've got to tie it directly to strategic objectives of that organisation. It's a non-negotiable for 2023. Yes, does that answer your question?
And speaking of 2023, it's my last question before we open the floor to questions. I said open. Can't speak. 2 glasses of wine. In 2023, how can reps stay agile at Malvina, and like where does you see this going in the future, and making sure that we're always looking back at what's going on within the buyer journey and everything in your market? Like that agility, I think, is so important. But what would those top tips be for people to take away?
3 words: always be learning. Thank you.
That's it. Go now. Anything to add on that, or is that?
I genuinely mean that. I try to do this myself as much as possible, right? A new report comes out, I want to read it. A new book comes out, I want to dedicate time to read it. If I don't have time to read the full book, I'll read the synopsis, right? But always try to make that time in your day to be learning what's happening in the industry, not just necessarily the product, right? You're gonna have that product knowledge. You're gonna learn it. Of course you will. But it's all the rest that you have to dedicate your own time to. Understanding the industry, understanding the challenges, what are the trends. That is something that's that's required of you if you want to be successful. So I genuinely mean that when I say always be learning. See what's happening in the market. Try to consume as much information as possible, but also make sense of it, right? So that when you do have that conversation with a buyer, you're able to make sense of what you've read and what you've learned for them.
Amazing. Perfectly answered. Right, I know there's so many hands going up, so let's go for first one.
In this world of taking the buyer down the yellow brick road, do you think that forecasting categories like MedPick, Scotsman, Command Over Message are outdated?
No, MedPic's not a forecasting category, it's a qualification methodology. But it's a really good point that you've made though. So I really like the way you're thinking about things is that when you think about, I'd argue not qualification methodology, because we'll always need qualification methodology because that helps us understand the robustness of the opportunity. But I actually think we need to go back to AIDA, which in marketing I'm sure you'll love, right? It's like, the buyer is the intent, not the salesperson is the intent. You can't force someone into your process. So I think actually the biggest things organizations can do is actually, it doesn't have to be AIDA, but they need to examine the buyer and bring the buyer's voice into the room and actually deeply understand their buyer, their typical buyer, and then build their processes around that. There is no sales processes. We kid ourselves that there's sales processes, and sometimes a customer follows our sales process. Actually, what there are buying process, and we need to align both sales and marketing collectively to those. I think that's a brilliant question. It shows you deeply understand that problem. Brilliant question.
Yes.
Well, so I mean, first of all, thank you for all of your insights. It's been really, really interesting just to see all of the different perspectives on these areas. So a little bit of context just before I ask this question. So I've been like a small SaaS company with my friend here, Robert, to my left, to a larger tech service-based company, Demand Science. Cognism is obviously a direct competitor in terms of obviously our DSI platform. The key thing that I want to understand, like, our key service is content syndication, right? Everyone knows the game when it comes to content syndication, getting their thought leadership in front of a new net audience. Ultimately, there's not going to be too many differentiators with us, Demand Science, anyone else within that space. I mean, there's obviously a CPL basis, the ICP that you're targeting, and your actual reach. So if you are the buyer, and I appreciate that all of you are on my direct ICP, maybe some of you are, but what do you actually want to be asked within this discovery to make that 20, 30 minutes actually worthwhile, and for you to come out of that call and be like, wow, this guy actually understood me and has actually got some value out of this?
Alice? I don't know if I'm going to be the right person for this, because I'm initially going to come at that with a lot of skepticism, just because like content syndication for me is like run a mile, like I don't want to do that anymore. So then maybe it is interesting, because I guess what I would need to be seriously convinced, like I would need to understand how content syndication can marry up to the way that buyers buy today, and that they like. I don't want to be pushing someone through a form to access my content. I want them to be able to like have that gated, like no gate, friction free, and I want to know that I want to be able to measure how like engaged they are with it, how much they've consumed it, and ultimately I don't want a list of leads at the end of it either. So I guess I would just need all of those objections handled like very early doors and understand like what the benefit for me would be in the way that I look at the world and like my philosophy on things. But I'm probably not your ideal.
No, of course not. I'll come back to those in just a second, but interesting to anyone else on the team.
I was going to say, actually, this ties very nicely with what Aaron said, right? Which is, how does everything relate to those strategic objectives that the company has for the year? Where does that fit in the big scheme of things? I think for myself, from an enablement perspective, hell, I would probably need a little bit more education around what content syndication is and what actually that, how that looks in practice.
Yeah.
But then that overarching theme is, how does that relate to the overall strategy of the company?
Yeah. No, I completely understand that. I mean, just to give you sort of a breakdown, and of course I appreciate your comment on that, Alice, it's ultimately like building in that opted-in database, right, at the end of the day. So I mean, if you're trying to drive like top of funnel like pipeline, and I appreciate you guys in sales enablement, I mean, the main sort of people that I'm going to go after from a prospecting point of view is more demand generation managers, so maybe this will be sort of fit the bill. But I mean, I could talk about this all day, so thank you for your insights. Thank you for a drink after. Thank you.
I found the nuances in regards to buying able to
Oh, sorry.
the structure within an internal organisation. The struggle I'm having with the person here is executing on a board level. How do you enable your champion to walk into a boardroom and be able to get signed off? So, context, I've been working with the COO for 9 months, who's in the board in that room, could gone through various different processes along the journey, but now we're at that stage where he's waiting for final signature from the board. How would you enable the board to make a decision, or rather the champion to present to the board in an effective way?
It's a really good question. So, and I'm not just saying that because I know I've said that so far to everyone, but it's actually a really good question.
You haven't said that to me at all. Side of my
If the cat fits. No, I'm joking, you've done a splendid job, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. It's a strange time to ask for validation, but I'll give it to you. Can we just get a round of applause for fucking Izzy, everyone? Jesus Christ. No. If you want attention, you'll get it. Back to the brilliant question, right? So here's the thing, right? Is that there's a couple of moving parts associated with this, right? First things first is that you, through your champion, you have to understand what's important to the board, and that comes through strategic objectives for the organisation. Second of all, you need to get them to connect the dots between what your product does and how it drives strategic outcomes. But there's actually another couple of really interesting moving parts, is that decisions are made by consensus. So if Izzy went and knocked at Jack's door on her own and said, we need to get this handsome guy from Sales Enablement to come and talk at our event, he'd probably tell her to fuck off, right? Whereas if everyone from their business was knocking at the door, people tend to listen up. But there's two moving parts you need to be conscious of. Number one, do we all agree that this is a problem that needs solving amongst everyone in the business? But here's the part where salespeople often fail. Do we agree that this is a priority? Now that is the bit where salespeople often go wrong. Is they don't get everyone who's in the champion group that we've built, or the buyer group we've built, to agree that this is a priority problem that needs to be solved. It's a brilliant qualifier. If they're sitting there going, well, actually, no, we've got 10 other things that are far more important. Why are we wasting our time? Come back to us when this is a priority. So to summarise on that is that you've got to help them connect the dots between the strategic objective and how your product or service helps them achieve that. Make sure that everyone agrees this is a problem that needs solving, and make sure you get everyone to agree it's a problem that needs solving now. Now, where we go wrong is we turn around and go, oh, will you put me in front of your board? And they'll turn around and go, no fucking way, mate. Do you know what I mean? Actually, what we want them to do is turn around and go, look, you're really bought into this. Do you want me to explain to you the best possible way of you getting this into their business? Yes. There's two things we need to do. We need to either get me in front of the board, or we need you to be able to articulate exactly how this is going to help the board achieve those two things. Which ones is more realistic? That's it. It's really, really simple. But we don't.
I would also add one more thing. If the board is anything like our board, is like they're going to want to know, okay, we might invest this money, but I want to know how we're going to be tracking, like how when you report back up to the board, you're going to be showing me like what I'm getting, the value I'm getting back from that, and that has been a positive investment. Not only to like get the initial sign off, but that you're continuing to like tie that back and how that's driving like strategic objective or whatever it is. So they should be presenting that framework as well alongside it and making sure that they're signing up to it. They're going to be accountable and they're like saying, I've also got a plan for how I'm going to continue to show you that.
That's a really good point. Actually, a really good point. Just to add one last thing to that, sorry, because it's a really good question, is that the new frontier for SaaS particularly is adoption. It's not purchasing the product. Because during the pandemic, there was a big light shone on sales enablement specifically, and everyone wildly went out and bought a shitload of products that no one's using, right? And now sales enablement is now holding the can and they're saying, well, show us the ROI. And we're going, oh, we don't know how to show ROI on this thing. So the way we need to be positioning our differentiator is actually around adoption, not around the product itself. Because you're selling in a market where I'm guessing most of you is commoditized value. You've got a competitor down the road who does pretty much the same thing. Where you can get differentiated value is talking about how this will be adopted, used, and derive value from the purchase of it. That's really, really important. Because someone's name's on that contract, someone's going to have a weird conversation about why no one's using it.
Right, but this is also, just to add, this is also where the importance of champions comes in, right? What's the main reason why we have churn? Oh, the champion left. They're no longer in the company. We lost our champion and they're not going to renew. Like that happens quite frequently. So the importance of building champions and having champions throughout the organization is key. But to your point, 100% adoption. Any piece of tech that I bring on, the one measure of success that I care about, or the main important one, is adoption. Are people using it? Are the sellers using it? Yeah.
Just conscious of time, we've got time for one more question.
No,
so.
surely more.
Well, it's nearly 9 o'clock. So, yeah, one more question, and then you can ask questions afterwards if you guys want to stick up for a bit. You haven't asked a question yet.
Thank you. It's actually what both two of you on the panel said. Marketing funnel is dead, but the sales cycle is dead, in various words. How are you measuring success then on the sales side, the marketing side, and then predicting performance going forward?
Do you want to start marketing side?
Yeah, I can talk through it. So I guess like back when I ran the sort of very traditional kind of lead gen play where we would force buyers through like a linear funnel, we had a very clear understanding of our conversion rates across that whole process, and also like the sales cycle that led to the ACVs, etc. So like a very clear benchmark on that. Since we shifted, we now have a very different set of metrics, and they're all like 10x what we were getting on the old way of doing things. So it's like black and white, and also it's been scalable. So I think that was the big thing for us. The whole lead generation engine and setup, it was resource intensive from sales and from marketing, and the way that we do things today is like in terms of CAC to LTV is so much more effective for us. So we just have like a very clear black and white picture of like new world is more effective for us.
Rory, would you like to add something?
The only like company that I can refer to that we've seen sort of have that shift as well is HubSpot. They used to be super gated, but they had amazing tools like SEO calculator and things like that, ancillary, offering free value, but it was gated, and they've shifted away from that. And 40% of their revenue is from inbound, from content. So they've proven that you don't need to gate it. And I think like if anyone can do it, one of the best in class at content, arguably, I think it's pretty much a good sign.
From a sales perspective, I'd say blended conversion through the pipeline with customer-led actions as the hard gates in the sales process, not us-led actions. But I can send my mum a proposal now. She's never been fucking buy the product, but we will celebrate going, my proposal's been sent out. So I look for customer-led actions as your hard exit criteria from stage to stage. And everything else is irrelevant. It's just qualifications, everything else.
I feel like we've got a real insight to your whole family, your mum, your wife, what your bathroom wall looks like, apparently, that's what you said.
I give everything on the stage.
Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you for that question. I'm so sorry. I'm sure everybody has so many questions, but please do connect with these 4 incredible panelists. Their QR codes are on the back of the pieces of paper that you have on your seats. Connect with them on LinkedIn, drop them a message. I'm sure I'm saying offering your time, but I'm sure they'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Can we have a huge round of applause for everyone?